Happy Thursday, happy Thursday. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Maiysha Clairborne. I'm the founder of the Mind ReMapping Academy. And um, I'm here to drop another nugget today. Now, I think that the last time that I was here on the live stream, I said that I'd be coming on regularly, dropping these various nuggets. And so, what I'm talking about today, or what I want to talk about today, is resistance. And it's an interesting topic for today, for me specifically, because I found myself resisting during this live stream. But it's really great because it allows me to even share and look and deepen on what resistance is. So, a lot of times people think of resistance as an active process, as an active verbal or an active, um, sort of non-verbal but physical process, resistance. And, it's applying force, force against something else that stops the action of. And so, we think of resistance as an active process, when in fact, resistance can really not only be passive, but it can be an unconscious process. And so, what I want to talk about today as we look at this whole concept of resistance is really what it is. And, there's a saying, resistance creates persistence, right? What we resist persists. And you might be wondering, well, why is that? And you may already know. But if you want to look a little deeper into why resistance causes persistence, and we want to look from an unconscious, a neural, sort of a neuropsychological perspective, or an unconscious mind perspective, then that's what I'm sharing about today. So, first of all, let's talk about resistance and all the things that can constitute resistance. Now, resistance is any time that we are not in flow. We are not going with the flow. For example, I had a client, and this client had a problem, and the problem was that, in essence, is that she needed help, and she didn't want to ask. She was unwilling to ask initially. And so, as we worked through this process, now there was a resistance. Now there was an outward resistance to ask. And so, as we went through our processes, as I went through what's important to her values, I went through, sort of to tease where the unwillingness was coming from. What was the root of the unwillingness? We started to uncover some limiting decisions, limiting beliefs. And so we came to a point where I asked the question, are you willing to move past those, to see a different view, to move past those limiting beliefs? And there was a hesitation. Now, one might, I think, that the hesitation would constitute resistance. One might think, well, maybe she was thinking about it. Maybe she was checking in with her body, and quite possibly that could be so. But you could take the case that hesitation, that prolonged hesitation, not like it was a short hesitation, but that prolonged hesitation, and using also my observation, I could see the unspoken communication on her face. There was resistance. And sometimes it's that subtle. Sometimes resistance is not as overt, and it's not as obvious as we might think it is or should be. Especially, this is important when we're talking and in communication with others, and we either, number one, feel it in ourselves, or we notice it. And sometimes you can notice it with your eyes, you can notice it with your ears, you can notice it with your senses, but sometimes you notice it with something internal, I call intuition. And really what that is the unconscious mind picking up very subtle cues in your observation that that allow you to have this internal, this sort of internal reaction or response, right? So at some point, I will come back and talk about the communication model as it applies to the unconscious mind, because there are a lot of ways that we take in information. And a lot of times we don't, there are conscious ways that we take information and there are unconscious ways that we take in information. And sometimes we can notice little things, and it's an intuitive noticing, but it's also our connection with the unconscious mind that allows us to notice and have those really attuned powers of observation. So back to resistance. Resistance can be that subtle. And so when you think about yourself, I always like to bring it back to the self, right? When you think about yourself and the things and what resistance feels like or looks like to you in yourself, you might, this is where it's important to connect to the body. So you might find that if you are hesitating to do something, there is a resistance there. Now, resistance in and of itself is not bad, but we got to look at, well, what's the root cause of the resistance? What's underneath the resistance? So I would like you to think about a time where you were going to do something and there was a hesitation. There either was a mental hesitation, or there was a physical hesitation, or there was an unspoken, I can't put my finger on it type of hesitation. Think of a time when that was. And when you think of that time and you go back to that time, think about what you felt in your body. What is it that you felt in your body? Was it a tensing of the shoulders? Was it a feeling in your stomach or your chest? What was that feeling of hesitation? That is what resistance, the subtle resistances, look like. Okay, that's one of the ways that it can look. Okay. So when you're experiencing that for yourself, you can begin to investigate. Because, see, the work that I do, mind remapping, which is based in neurolinguistic programming, is really about understanding how we produce certain behaviors, how getting curious about what's underneath, what is at the root of our behavior patterns, our behaviors and our behavior patterns. And when we begin to get to the root of our behaviors and our behavior patterns, then we can be at the source of that. We can determine and not be at the effect of life circumstances, and really begin to determine, what is next best to do. So you can begin to investigate what is the root of this resistance. All right. And oftentimes the root of most resistance is either some type of stuck negative emotion, which it could be anger, could be sadness, could be fear, hurt, guilt, could be stress, could be anxiety, could be any of those things, right? And you have to investigate for yourself. And then, or it could be a limiting belief or decision that's stopping us, right? And I say limiting belief or decision, really, I tend to refer more towards limiting decision, a decision that we've made about something that will or will not happen based on us accepting a belief. So the decision is the decision, the limiting decision is preceded by accepting a belief, because we have lots and lots of beliefs that come at us all day long, especially if you're scrolling on social media. You'll have lots and lots and different beliefs that are happening. But when you talk to people, they have their beliefs, but we don't always accept without, uncritically other people's beliefs. But every now and then something comes along, or someone comes along, and it alters our perception. And we make a decision to accept a belief. And then we make decisions based on that decision that we've made to accept the belief. So now, underneath resistance, oftentimes, and this is, it's not always or never, this is oftentimes underneath resistance is some type of negative emotion or limiting decision. And in order to get to the root of resistance, excuse me, in order to get to the root of resistance, you must get to the root of what that negative emotion, that limiting decision is. Now, why is this important? Because, one of the reasons that resistance creates persistence is because when we are resisting, we're actually focusing on the thing that we're moving away from, the limiting belief or the decision, the um, negative emotion that's causing hesitation. We're focusing in that direction. It's like focusing on something in the past. And our little reticular activating system, this little area in the brain that seeks to match in the world the pictures that are made in our mind. See, what happens is usually when there is resistance, there's already a way that we picture, because our brain operates in pictures, there's already a way that we picture things are going to go. Even if it's fleeting, even if it's unconscious, there's already a way that we picture things are going to go. And if that thing is not to our liking and we're focusing on that, what we're doing in hesitation is trying to avoid or moving away from that thing. But the problem is with the reticular activating system trying to match the thing that you're focusing on, the pictures that are being created based on the thought pattern that you're focusing on or unconsciously focused on. It seeks that thing out and produces that same, notices, causes the brain, causes you to notice the same thing happening out in the world. So that is, neurologically speaking, why resistance causes persistence. So then why is that important? Because it's an incentive. It's an incentive then to really look into our resistances and to look at, well, is this a resistance? Like I said, not all resistance is bad. Resistance is what it is. It's not bad, nor is it good, but it is a clue. It is an indicator to look a little deeper. And so this is an incentive, knowing that this resistance creates persistence, and what are you creating that's persisting in your life is the question really to ask. It's the place to stand. Like, where are you creating persistence that you don't want in your life, in your organization, in your business? Where are you doing that? And so it's an incentive to begin to look at our resistances, to begin to notice where we're resisting, and then look deeper as to, well, what's behind that? Is it a fear? Is it a concern? Is it a limiting decision? Is it a decision that I've made that could be limiting, right? Or is there a perceived threat? Is there a perceived danger? Is the danger that you're perceiving, is it an actual, or is it really just perceived? See, there are levels to be able to identify and really look at, well, where is the resistance coming from? Because when you can identify the root of it, you can identify whether the resistance is necessary or not, whether the resistance is a valid resistance, or is it something that you can sort of dissolve by looking at if the limiting decision or the negative emotion is warranted in that time, right? So if your resistance is because of a fear of something, but it's not an actual threat, it's a perceived threat, right? The brain perceives threat, and then there's this response that's sort of a trauma response. If the brain perceives, oh, that's, maybe the threat is that people will laugh, or it will sound dumb, or whatever that threat is. Now, there could be other threats that are bigger threats, but we have to distinguish what's the perceived threat and what is the actual threat. And when we begin to look underneath our resistances, and that's by getting into our body and allowing ourselves to notice what resistance feels like, then we begin to get to the root of it so that we can actually distinguish what's real and what's perceived. And then from that point, we can take action based on that. Now, to this point, I've talked about why this is important for oneself, but it's also important as you're communicating with others. So how is this applicable when you're communicating with someone else? Because here's the thing, if you notice a resistance, see, many times when we notice resistance in others, we make it about ourselves. We make it about something about us. Something's wrong. We've done something. We've said something. Um, but when we see resistance, when we notice, whether we notice it outright, overtly, or whether we notice it intuitively, we can begin to call that resistance out. Now, how do you do that? You can say, I noticed something. I noticed the hesitation. Was that just me? Or was that, was there, is there something there? Right? Without saying, you're resisting. Right? And I can do that with my clients because I have a specific rapport with them. And I can tell them that I notice resistance. And you may have a specific rapport with the people in your life, whether they be your spouse or your friend or your colleague or your staff or your team, right? But you can say, I notice resistance or I notice hesitation. What is that? That's the only question you need to ask. I notice hesitation. What is that? And that simple question, sometimes we make things very complicated. That simple question can actually begin to spark conversation that gets to the root of the hesitation. And at that point, when you open the conversation, sometimes we shut down conversations, but these are things that help you to be able to open the conversation. When you open the conversation by just asking, what is that? I noticed something. What is that? Then they will usually volunteer that information. And if they say nothing, you can say, okay, got it. I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing going on. There was nothing wrong because I just noticed this little subtle shift. You get shift in energy, or I noticed this look on your face, or I noticed you kind of lean back, or I noticed whatever you noticed, right? Or I noticed something that seemed like a hesitation. What was that? So that's my little tip for today in getting through people's resistance, like really getting to the root of the resistance. And if you have enough rapport, which is one of the things I teach in my trainings, if you have enough rapport with people, then they will become uninhibited with telling you even when is resistance. Just the fact that you ask what a resistance it's an indicator to a person that you care, right? What's going on, that you care. And so these are some things that you can begin to apply for yourself in noticing your own resistances and asking yourself what's going on. Or if you notice resistance in someone else, whether it's, even a parent, you can ask your child, your teenager. I have a 7-year-old. So this work that I do, mind remapping work that I do, that I teach, it has wide application. I do a lot of trainings individually, but I also do, trainings, organizational trainings. And so this has wide application. I teach parents, I teach doctors, I teach all, real estate agents, lawyers, all of it's applicable in all these industries, but it's also applicable for moms and dads and sisters and brothers and parents. And it really transforms communication. And that is something that I think is underappreciated, is the level to which communication forms and deepens relationships when done masterfully, not just effectively. I mean, effective is great, but when done masterfully, it really connects and deepens relationships in a way that forwards missions. So that's the little nugget that I wanted to give today. If you have more questions, you can always visit me on my website, drmaiysha.com, or if you have questions about the trainings that I do, you can go to mindremappingacademy.com, or you can just send me a message. All right, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, of the weekend. As you can see, I got into it today. That resistance dissolved and I had a lot to say. So I'm looking forward to the feedback. Comment if you would. I would love to hear what you got from this nugget today, what you'll be taking into your own life from this nugget today. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section and I'm happy to answer them as well. I'd love to hear what resistances you're finding that you are dissolving. All right. You all have a great rest of the weekend. Again, you can visit me at mindremappingacademy.com if you want to know more about these mind remapping trainings for yourself or for your organization. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. We'll talk soon. Peace.